everyone, and welcome again for a new session of NOW-fertility Connect. Good to see you all again. And today we have a few questions that we received from our patients that we hope we can answer most of them. It's a small group today, but it's fine. I think we'll do the job. Uh, some of the questions are related to pure IVF cases. Some are related to patient consultancy, management, support, and so on. So I will be choosing the questions that will be probably fit all of us that we are meeting today. And I'm going to start with the first question that we had. It's a patient who said that she had produced a lot of eggs were collected, but she ended up having one embryo at the end on day 5. So this is quite a common problem. We see it often, not as rare as we used to believe. So the question is that always patient asks is, why did this happen? What explanation usually we give the patients? And I would like to start with Ian to see if he believes that the sperm plays a role in having less embryo developed. And probably I can talk a little bit about ultimately the eggs and so on. But Ian, do you think the sperm has a role in having less embryos produced at the end of the day?
Absolutely, it has the potential to be part of the role here, and I think that sometimes gets forgotten in this conversation. It's very easy for the woman, I think, to kind of look at her egg yield and then the fertilization rate and then the embryo development, and we put a lot of focus on egg quality, especially in relation to a woman's age. So when she's older, that egg quality is going to be, not quite so good, and therefore the embryos maybe, won't be so good. But, we cannot forget that an embryo is the coming together of that DNA of the egg and the sperm. And what we see, and I think there's a lot more research now, it shows that, we know that the paternal genome kicks on in around day 3 of that embryo development. And so if there's any issues on the male side in terms of sperm, mainly really we're looking at the sperm DNA integrity, if there's any issues going on there, then that can impact the development of that embryo. So we often see where DNA fragmentation is quite high, we see that embryos, sort of fall away at day 3, or they collapse, or they kind of slow up a little bit in terms of their development. So I think the important thing here is don't put everything on, well, it's all the egg, it's all the female side. If there's something going on the male side, or potentially, then that chap's got to be investigated, and you've got to look maybe a little bit deeper beyond a semen analysis. So yes, absolutely, sperm could be at play here.
Yeah, as you said, we tend to blame most of the time the eggs for this problem, but I believe that the age of the woman is the most crucial probably factor
Mm,
leading to
absolutely.
this issue. But again, the sperm, we tend to forget it. We feel that its role is simply just to fertilize the eggs and that's it. But as you mentioned, the development and ultimately the quality of the embryo depends a lot on the sperm that we have. Uh, Again, we always tell our patient that the number that they get in egg collection does not mean it's going to be equal to the number of embryos on day 5. There are so many things that might happen. As you said, probably no fertilization, poor quality eggs, arrest of embryos on the way. Sometimes we have bad embryos. So all of these factors are mostly related, although we believe they are mostly related to age and quality of the eggs, but also the sperm plays a very important role. Um, this is a question I would like to answer it with Claire, if you don't mind, being a fertility mentor and a coach. I have some questions for you related to nutrition, but a patient who comes, let's say she's 42 years old, and her AMH also at the same time is low.
Mhm.
What would be the question that she should be asking you as a coach and later on asking her consultant?
Thank you very much, Tony. If you don't mind, could I just jump in on the previous question as well? Because I remember the first time you and I spoke, Tony, I think it was last year, and you explained to me PCOS, as it was known at the time, which is now PMOS, is all
Yeah.
we often see really high egg numbers there, and sometimes that can give people a lot of hope when it comes to the numbers that they're getting and the amount of embryos they're going to get. But obviously, sometimes a high number of eggs, particularly in on like a particularly high number of eggs can be a sign that there might be some PMOS going on there. And then
Right.
that could possibly indicate that there could be some mitochondrial issues going on, inflammation, all things that aren't great for the egg's ability to develop into an embryo. So I'm always really, really clear. I'm always banging that drum that number of eggs collected has very little reference. That I don't know of a ratio. I don't think any clinic would publish a ratio because it depends so much on the environment that the eggs are growing in, of course, the sperm. And yeah, I just wanted to touch on that because, as you know, I'm a wee bit of an egg quality geek.
Yeah.
So to answer the question about low AMH, so low AMH, that's our anti-Müllerian hormone, and that's an indication of how well someone is likely to respond to their IVF medication. So we know that we only need one egg, we only need one good egg to make a baby. And I think sometimes it can feel a little bit doom and gloom when women go in for their consultations, not with you guys, but when they go to certain clinics, it can sometimes just feel like they're being written off almost because of either their age, which is just a number, or their AMH, which again is these are statistics, they're starting points. So aside from AMH, I would be asking them what their antral follicle count is and how that's responding. Are they testing inflammatory markers? And what they would suggest the protocol is for egg quality and energizing the eggs during this 90-day window. And are we relying on a standard generic cycle? And if not, why? Basically, in the consultation with the IVF clinic, what do you suggest for me and why? As a fertility coach, I would be saying to them, okay, we need to get your body ready to create these happy, healthy eggs. And then we need to get your body ready to grow them into a happy, healthy baby. So that's nutrition, inflammation, hormone balance, all of that good stuff, managing stress levels, doing the right type of exercise. So there's so much that they can be doing that they don't need a prescription for, but also there's nothing to stop them asking these questions because the clinics want to help. They want us to have the babies as well, don't they? That's why they exist.
Yeah, yeah, right. So I think, yes, for a woman, she's 42 and she has low AMH. She has two problems: her age, which probably will affect the quality of the eggs, and then her low AMH is going to affect the quantity of the eggs. But as you mentioned, if we coach the patient and we prepare the patient the right way to give her the maximum chance to produce these good eggs that we want at the end of the day, I think this will be of good help for them. So we always should tell the patient that a low AMH does not mean that she cannot get pregnant. The AMH is just a number that is telling us that either she's going to give us a good number of eggs or a poor number of eggs. Ultimately, her age will be a major player. And in these, what we call elderly patients, we need to support them as much as we can, as you mentioned, so that they can be physically, mentally, and emotionally ready for the journey so that we know it's going to be a long journey. So we need to support them with that for sure. Uh, a very interesting question that we had from one of our patients. And sometimes we see it in the clinic when we have a couple, one partner is for sperm donation and the other partner is against the sperm donation. And this raises a lot of emotional conversation between the couple, and sometimes they come resort to us to see how we can solve this, how we can help them in taking the decision or convincing one partner to accept or refuse the donation itself. Ian, have you had such a issue with some patients?
Yeah, absolutely. This comes up quite often on our support group that we run, kind of each month on Zoom, and quite a few guys have come through over the years that have been faced with a diagnosis of azoospermia. So this is where there's no sperm in the ejaculate, and we would always encourage them to have all the right investigations before they get their head around sperm donation, because actually just because there's no sperm in the ejaculate doesn't mean there isn't a route to fatherhood through your own, sperm. It just might mean that you need a bit of help from a urologist to try and get that sperm out of the testicles. But if that's all been exhausted and donation is the only option, then this is really hard for guys. I mean, some guys will go to it straight away. They won't even question it, and they're happy to crack on. But for other guys, it's a huge challenge. It's if I always sort of say, if we boil it down to why are we on this planet, and it is to reproduce, and part of that, and the big part of that for a man is passing on your genetic material, is passing on, you and fostering that in a new child. So to have that taken away from you and be told that, donor sperm is the only route is really difficult. And that is not, it's not a decision I think that men should ever take lightly, and a couple should never take lightly. And it takes time. It's not like you go to a clinic, have a consultation, say, look, I'm sorry, or not I'm sorry, but we're gonna have to go with donor sperm. That you just, okay, well, yeah, that's fine, tick the box and off you go. There is a lot to process here. And I think, one of the big things is for men is then, well, is that child going to be mine? Will they look like me? Will they behave like me? What features of mine will they have, their personality and what have you? And I think one of the things that really helps men on this, and I've heard the guys in the support group talk about it, is like, well, do you want to be the genetic father or do you want to be a dad? Because actually being the genetic father obviously is very important to a lot of men. But actually, what is it about being a father or a dad that's important to you? Is it, doing a plait in your daughter's hair? Is it taking your son to go and play football? Sorry, they're very stereotypical categories there. But what is it to be a dad? Is it, going down the park, taking the kids swimming, taking them to the beach, taking them for a pizza, having ice cream, doing muddy play, all of that, that's for a lot of men, that is actually what, fatherhood is about. But they've got to get their head around the fact that the genetics aren't there. But we've got guys that have become donor fathers or fathers through donor conception, and they are so happy because all of that worry and fear washes away as soon as that child arrives, because you would do anything for that child. You will love them and nurture them as your own, regardless of the genetics, and you're there to enjoy being a father with them. But I go back to that point, it's not an easy decision. And if a couple are struggling with that to get their head around it, then that is understandable and that is fine. And I think both partners have got to respect each other in making that decision and the time. It's a bit like grief in some ways. There is no timeline for grief. Some people will get over a loss in a few months, some it'll be years. Getting your head around a sperm donor can take a long time. And I think that the final thing I'll say on it is get some professional support. We've done a great podcast episode with Nina Barnsley from the Donor Conception Network, and they provide outstanding support, free resources. They also have a membership where you can then connect with other donor families. And that's where then you can really kind of unpack it and explore it all. So it is a complex issue, and it takes time and sometimes professional support.
Yeah, this is true. And I think another question that we had also related somehow to male problems is how can a partner encourage men to do sperm tests without feeling like blame? Because, in some cultures, men, they don't like to do sperm analysis. And we have seen patients, women doing all kinds of tests, invasive tests, painful tests, and all kinds of tests, and still the man never did a sperm analysis. And in my own practice, the first thing I test is a sperm. Many times I refuse doing any test for a woman for having a sperm test in front of me. So how can a partner encourage her husband or her partner to do a sperm test? Claire, do you have any? Yeah,
Yeah,
Ian and Claire, please go ahead.
yeah, this is such a good question, and it's something that comes up a lot, and we see we see it sometimes actually with the men that are referred to us for testing through our lab, where I can just tell by the conversations I have with them that they are really resistant to these tests, and then they'll kick it down the road, and they won't book in, and then they'll postpone. We've also, funnily enough, got a podcast coming out next week next month with one of our team members who's South Asian, and she talks about the South Asian community and how a semen analysis is the last thing a guy will want to do and will be willing to do. So, like you said, Tony, like the complications of certain communities and ethnicities and religions around testing is really, really difficult. I mean, when I saw this question, I was like, oh, this is a really difficult one to answer. And I don't think I've got a magic kind of answer. I think, as is often the case, and something I say a lot, is it's got to be down to conversations, honest conversations between the couple. And really that woman that, if it's the woman trying to convince the man, it's like just expressing how she feels about it. And actually, this is not a judgment or a criticism of him. This is a biological process that we have to go through. And actually, I think one of the things for men sometimes is information is power. Not power over the relationship or the couple, but power in the sense that you can then do something. I think a lot of men are very fearful of doing these tests because they worry that it defines them as a man, defines them in terms of their masculinity, their virility. But actually, if we just say, right, let's just boil this down to the fact that it's a biological process, it's a diagnostic test. And the beauty of male fertility is if there's something not quite right, we can potentially do something about it. There's a huge amount that we can do to improve sperm. Okay, so if you do the test and the results come back bad, well, what can we do about it? And what support can you get to encourage you to do things and make improvements? So I think trying to have that conversation is important. Maybe also, just saying to the guy, look, we need to know the quality of your sperm because that's going to impact the quality of the pregnancy, and it's going to impact the health of your future child. And I think maybe when you put it like that to a man, they're then going to be a little bit more willing to do something for, their future offspring, when they realize that actually they have a role to play beyond, just having sex and that sperm going to the egg. This is about so much more. So I think maybe doing that as well. And then I'll go back to the other point I always make is professional support, counseling and having that kind of conversation as well. Maybe a guy's going to be even less likely to go to counseling, compared to going to do a semen analysis. But if you can get them in front of a counselor, a couples counseling, that can help. And then finally, and then I'm going to let Claire say something because I feel like it's becoming the Ian webinar. I think the other thing with men is we often like to think that it's our idea, even though it's been the woman's idea. So I think sometimes with men is leave them information to digest in their own time. And this is where things like podcasts, and maybe a book or a leaflet or a news article, just drip feed information to them over a period of time. And then eventually they'll be like, you know what, I need to go get this test done. And the woman will be like, oh, what, this one that I mentioned 6 months ago. But I think this is where podcasts are really, really powerful because guys can listen to those traveling to work, at work, going out for a run or whatever it is. And we've had loads of guys email us in saying, thanks to the podcast, I've done X, Y, and Z. So getting that information to them without it being like, you've got to go and do this test. It's like, actually, darling, I found this really interesting. I think you might find it interesting too. So yeah. Claire, over to you. I'm going to shut up for a minute.
Thank you very much, Ian. And you'll not be surprised to hear that I am going to be quite a bit less diplomatic than you were along this. You work with the men and I work with the women, and even just the way this question is worded, I think there's an implication that there is already blame on the other side. So in standard fertility care, it's the woman that tends to undergo the invasive blood tests, transvaginal ultrasounds, the egg retrievals, and the man provides a sample in a cup on the day of the procedure. So even the wording of how can she get him tested without hurting his feelings, I feel like that in itself is hinting that it is her fault or that there's an implication that it should have been her fault. It's almost reinforcing that narrative that it is her failure to investigate if things go wrong. It's a 50% reality. Male factor is primary or co-contributing to 50% of cases, yet the female factor diagnostics happen first. I could have rang a bell and waved a banner around, Tony, when you said that you wouldn't investigate further unless you had a sperm analysis in front of you. It's so much easier. And in real life, it's so much cheaper as well. We've got people from all over the world here that some are paying privately for testing. If a couple are about to spend 15, 30, who knows, on one cycle of IVF and putting the woman's body through medical intervention, flying blind on the male factor is absolutely, and I'm sorry to say this, bonkers in my opinion. And I think there's only so far we can go with protecting male egos. And you can obviously tell that this is something I care about very deeply. But I don't think anyone here would deny that the women are bearing the brunt already. So feeling like blame or protecting male egos, not really something that I'm likely to pander to at all, unfortunately.
Love it. Totally agree, Claire. Well done.
Thank you, Ian.
So let's move into nutrition now. And I'm sure Claire can help us a lot with that. The questions that we got is, how can you balance the food and traditions that are important for certain cultures or certain families with the fertility nutrition advice that they get or see online?
First thing, just be careful what you see online. Like protect your own feed, because you can literally open up Instagram and see experts who are unqualified recommending completely opposite plans within 2-3 minutes of each other. So we need to really protect our own feed and be careful of what we're listening to. And I always like to give examples when it comes to fertility. So very often, one of my specialties is egg quality and managing BMI. Okay. So say you have a lady who is overweight, she has a BMI of 37, and she knows that she needs to bring her BMI down either to qualify for IVF or to improve her chances. Okay. She'll open up an Instagram or she'll go into Google and it'll tell her, oh, just eat loads of avocados. Avocados are brilliant for female fertility. So she goes off and she does that, and she's probably consuming an additional 15 to 2,000 calories per day without changing anything else. So before I got off my soapbox, I would just think about, protecting our own feed and who we're listening to. But I actually love this question in terms of traditions and cultures. And the best way to do that, in my opinion, is to understand the macronutrients of all foods. So it doesn't matter what the culture is, okay? If I'm Scottish, so I like mince and tatties. I like a lot of beige food. I like a lot of bland food. There's people on this call from all over the world. Every single plate is going to be made up of either one or a mix of all three macronutrients. Macro just means big, and the macronutrients are protein, fats, and carbohydrates. And every culture, every single culture in the world eats from all three of these. So let me just take a snip and post it here, right? So this is from just one of my clients when she started working with me. I'm going to put it in the chat here, so hopefully everyone can see it. Oh no, yeah, there's the chat there. So that's just a really basic screenshot from MyFitnessPal, okay? And what that's showing when she first started working with me was that, and this is very typical with a Western woman's diet, okay? This is really normal. Her protein for the day was sitting at 12%, her dietary fats were sitting at 32%, and her carbohydrates were sitting at 56%. For optimal hormone balance, optimal egg quality, we're really looking to even this out a little bit. And without geeking out about the density and the calorie background of each of these macronutrients, understanding what every plate we have in front of us that is made up of a mix of carbs, fats, and proteins, and understanding how much of our plate is coming from each means that we can improve our fertility. And it doesn't matter what cuisines we're eating from, it doesn't matter what country in the world or what traditional values we have, because we all consume carbs, fats, and proteins. And if we know where those carbs and fats and proteins are in each kind of plate or each meal, we can make that protein more. We can make sure that the fats are coming from healthy sources, and we can potentially have fewer carbohydrates just to balance out that insulin.
Okay, interesting. Okay, thank you very much. I see Andrea has joined us. So I have a question for you, Andrea. Do you think there's enough being done to educate people about age-related fertility decline? Do you think the message is being translated easily to younger population, to women in general about the age impact on fertility? Because, sometimes we see patients more than 35 or even 40, and they are surprised when you tell them that the chances are declining simply just because of the age. So do you think there's enough education? And if not, what can we do to help to transmit this message to the younger population?
Yes, as a gynecologist and with my professional experience, I actually saw patients who think while they have regular periods, they also don't have issues with possible declining of fertility. I always inform them that we should do some basic tests like hormonal tests, at least AMH, which is a good marker for ovarian reserve, and ultrasound to understand how many follicles they have, antral follicles they have in their ovaries. So to have the whole picture about their ovarian reserve. Many of them actually they don't think that they might have issues with infertility in advanced age, and all gynecologists actually should inform women about the possibility of egg freezing, especially for those women who don't have a clear idea about parenthood, that when they would like to have children, or if they don't feel ready at the moment, it doesn't mean that they can't be parents later. Of course, also if we notice low ovarian reserve, this doesn't mean that they will not get pregnant, but it means that it will take longer time, more effort, more energy, everything to achieve successful pregnancy. So I think gynecologists quite often forget to ask them about their plans for the future pregnancy, if they have any, and to inform them that egg freezing process is a good possibility to help them if they will have issues with infertility.
Yeah. AMH is becoming a very common popular test done among gynecologists. But I think we should always keep in mind that there's sometimes an abuse of the test itself. So we tend to do it right and left for even girls in the 20s with no risk factors like surgeries, endometriosis, or family history of early menopause. And this might lead to some, I don't want to call it abuse, but doing more and more egg freezing for young women who are not in need of that. But of course, we need to educate the patients about the reserve, about the potential of getting pregnant, the decline of reserve with time, the chance of getting pregnant with time. So doing a baseline ultrasound with AMH is always a good practice, but beware not to, as I said, overuse it and end up doing more egg freezing for people who are not in need at a certain age or certain time. And in relation to this, we tend to emphasize in our centers the success rate of our IVF. We are proud of the success rate, and we tend a lot to forget about the impact on the well-being of patients, whether it's the male or the female partner. So do you feel this in your clinic and Claire in your consultation? Because we think that the most important thing for us is getting pregnant. And sometimes we forget this really difficult journey they're going through, whether they succeed or they fail, and the impact on the patient wellness.
Yeah. Do you want to go first, Andrea?
Yes, okay. So mostly women have impression that IVF can do everything, that there is no possibility of failure. But of course, when I explain them that, of course, if we have in a lot of mature eggs, this is not doesn't mean that they will be all fertilized and that we will have healthy embryos, because until we get a healthy embryo on day 5, 6 before embryo transfer, the development of these embryos, also if they seem of great quality at the beginning, can stop. And also after embryo transfer, there is still no guarantee of successful pregnancy, because sometimes they just have idea, okay, now I will do IVF, they will transfer me a nice, healthy embryo, just looks like by an embryologist, and I will deliver a healthy baby on term. But until successful delivery, it's a long way to achieve this pregnancy that continues to progress, and then that we find with the antenatal test that there are no abnormalities in development of this fetus, and that they come to a delivery of a healthy baby on term.
Yeah, Claire?
So in this question, I don't really think of well-being as being separate from the science. I think of it as part of the story with the science. So success rates obviously are very important. It's one of the first things that any client is going to ask about. But well-being takes into account the environment that the egg is going to grow in, and also the environment that any healthy embryo is going to grow in. So not just things like typical stress or chronic cortisol, and this is very well established, chronic cortisol and metabolic distress, that can directly impact the uterine blood flow. But what it can also mean is women can, or families, I need to stop saying women, apologies everyone, especially Ian, but couples can go into just shutdown, they can stop trying, they can end up chronically stressed, depressed, they can stop eating, they can end up, going overweight. Well-being is part of the science. It's not just something that sits alongside that's like a nice little tick. It all needs to go together, in my opinion.
Yeah, sure, of course. This question also, Claire, can you probably help us to understand how do you respond for a patient to come to question the decision to become a solo parent? Have you had
So
such,
this isn't actually something. Sorry, on you go, Tony. What were you saying?
Yeah, I was saying, do you encounter such patients? Do you coach such
So
patients?
I tend to work with women earlier on. If they're thinking about becoming a solo parent, I would work with them for the 3 to 6 months before they would move towards, working with a clinic. So I would work with them in priming their body and their eggs. But again, I feel like I'm about to get back on my soapbox, but it's nobody's opinion, it's nobody's business why someone decides to become a solo parent. I think anyone deciding to become a solo parent is a very, very brave decision, and it's entirely 100% their choice. And anyone that's fought hard enough to become a solo parent wants it and deserves it. So I know that's probably not answering your question, but that's how I feel about it, Tony.
Yeah, of course, this is definitely a personal decision that we all should respect and offer the support and treatment for this patient. I think there should be no issue related to that. Of course, in some places, some countries, some cultures, they will not accept doing IVF without a marriage certificate even. So, but in general, we're talking about patients where solo parenthood is acceptable and can be done in clinics. I think the support for the decision is always good. We need always to support our patients with the decision. We can always counsel them, we can always advise them, but respecting their decision, I think, is very crucial for all of us. Any comments, any questions from you? Anything you'd like to add?
Not on that one. I would like to go back to the age one, if I may, Tony.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Because we had a whole conversation just back there about age-related fertility decline, but we didn't talk about the men at all. And I think that is a classic within the fertility industry, where we put all the focus on the woman again, all the focus on the AMH, the antral follicle count. And this does go back to the question we had earlier about embryo development, and actually, the woman's age and egg quality, I think, is the biggest deciding factor in fertility and IVF success. But we cannot discount men's age in this process as well. because we know testosterone declines in men, it doesn't decline anywhere near as quickly as the female hormones decline with the menopause, but there is a very gradual decline by about 1% per year from, I think, about 42. That impacts their metabolism, their BMI. If their BMI and their fat levels go up, that causes a bigger buildup in estrogen, again, impacts their hormones. Their ability to combat oxidative stress declines with age. That increases DNA fragmentation, and we also know sperm DNA fragmentation does increase with age. So I think that whole piece around education and age and fertility, it very much needs to include the men, because it's just fundamental. It's absolutely fundamental. And what we see sometimes is obviously where you've got an older woman at 42, the guy may be 48 or 50. You know, we've got guys that have come through our clinic for testing who are in their 60s. You know, they are going to have different issues to a man in their 30s. And so men need to be mindful of this. And there is a lot that they can do around lifestyle and diet and healthy eating and healthy exercising to help manage their hormones, their oxidative stress levels, and their sperm quality. So I really wanted to chip in and just make sure that that is not forgotten in the conversation about age and fertility decline.
Yeah, sure, for sure. I think the data is now speaking of itself, and more data shows that also the age of the man is playing a very important role when it comes to the success of the IVF itself.
Yeah.
Even with the egg donation, we used to say that woman undergoing egg donation, her age does not play an important factor when it comes to success rate. And now the newest data says no. Even if we're going through egg donation, the age of the woman still affect the ultimate pregnancy rate. So age, both men and women, is crucial for a healthy and successful reproductive life.
I've just posted in the chat for anyone watching, Mel Johnson, who's part of this panel, but she's not here today. But she's got an excellent website and page around solo parenting. And she's excellent. So if whoever asked this question, I would definitely direct you to Mel. She's great.
Thank you for that. Okay, I think this was a very nice, interesting talk today, session. Thank you all for being with us. Hope to see you again in future sessions.